Thank you, Nigel. All right, we're on. Beautiful. How is that? Simone said, how are we going to keep people engaged in the last session of the day? I'm like, life insurance. How good is this? So thanks for the last panel. That was wonderful. That was our warm-up act. So now this session is going to take us more into the realm of life insurance. How can Insurtech help insurers remain relevant? Of course, you can never get enough life insurance chatter, although someone yesterday, you might find this hard to believe, suggested that life insurance isn't sexy. We're going to prove differently. Right. Now, a little setup first, some headlines from recent times. Are life insurance advisors at risk of extinction? Life insurance sector profits plummet 60%. These are just two of the many headlines in the last year that illustrate the trouble that the life insurance industry is in. 5 years ago, we had 28,000 advisors. This is now 16,000. Of that 16,000, 13,000 are qualified for life insurance advice. Advisor Ratings reported that only 6,000 of those sold a life insurance policy last year. Drilling down further, only 493 advisors were responsible for 50% of new sales in the last year. I'll just say that again. 493 advisors contributed to 50% of the retail life insurance sales last year. Insurers are struggling, advisors are turning away from insurance advice. Given these challenges, how can Insurtech help insurers to remain relevant? Thankfully, we have a very well qualified panel to dig into this for us. Representing the perspectives of advice and distribution, we have Ben Donald, MD of Austbrokers Life. He knows advice, he runs a licensee business, so wonderful for our conversation today. From the Insurtech perspective, we have Aurora Voss, co-founder and CEO of Zemble. She's been very successful both here and overseas, has some wonderful perspectives on success. And from the life insurer perspective, we have Hicham Mourad, CTO of ClearView Wealth. He has extensive experience in delivering corporate programs internally as well as with vendor teams. Their lengthy bios are also available on the program, of course. Please welcome Ben, Aurora and Hicham. So we might kick off first from your perspective, Ben. So what's your thinking in terms of relevance in this context? Troubled times, are insurers hitting the mark?
I think before that introduction, I was actually feeling really optimistic. So thanks for that. So I've been in the game for about 12 years. And as Marc was saying, it's obviously not been the greatest last 5 years. I think COVID was just the sort of icing on the cake for us. We've been beaten up a little bit with legislation. But I think one of the truths that nobody's sort of pointed to or realised to a certain extent is that a lot of our downward trend is a result of lack of investment in the industry. So superannuation, huge amounts of investment. I look out at the marketplace there and there wasn't a single person that was there connected into life insurance, right? It's all general insurance focused. So I think that lack of investment has certainly not helped. But putting that aside, moving forward, and why I do remain optimistic, is that the government's made a lot of effort in recent times to try and open up the accessibility of life insurance and life insurance advice. So in my mind, previously life insurance has been sort of maybe the top 20% of Australians would go get advice because it can be an expensive endeavour. Now, with the government changes, I think that's going to expand to effectively the mass market. So in my mind, you have a look from start to finish, you go, right, we've got a huge amount of demand, massive amount of demand, and we've had a lack of tech investment. So I would have thought that makes this industry in particular something worthwhile investing.
Lovely, that's a good pitch. I like it. So Aurora, from your perspective, from that Insurtech and your experience, what's your take on relevance and insurer relevance more specifically?
Look, I think I started in this, I don't come from an insurance background. Now I do because I'm 6 years into an Insurtech. But when I started 6 years ago, our first sort of crop of customers were life insurance businesses, and there was a lot of fear, Royal Commission, all of that when I first started. I think it used to be what I used to see on the pitch circuit was a lot of fear around, the only way to remain relevant is basically to turn your tech into like AWS or Amazon. That was like constantly, you've got to be like Amazon, you've got to make it that easy to buy. That didn't always sit well, because when you really dig into life insurance in particular, it's quite a lot more complex than that. You don't really want every Australian just like buying life insurance at the click of a button, do you? A lot of downstream issues there. And I think what I'm really encouraged by is 5-6 years later, I've seen in life insurance and just insurance organisations in general get a lot more serious and a lot more confident in what relevance means to their organisation particularly. I think that's a really important conversation to have, because it's easy, for Insurtechs to sort of blaze in and say, this is what relevance means, and without me, you're not that. So it's been really encouraging to see particularly life insurance organisations really start to think about what does relevance mean to me. And I'm telling you, it's a little bit different for every single customer that I have, certainly, and all of the prospects that I'm talking to. I can talk a bit more about
beautiful. I think we'll delve more into that. Might just jump to Hicham. So your perspective from an insurer on relevance, what are you kind of seeing, feeling? What's your take?
I think, to put it simply, if I can keep Ben happy, then it's going to keep me happy. I think just the main thing is around life insurance. There's a level of complexity that comes with life insurance, and there's we've heard about regulation, the regulatory landscape within life insurance a fair bit from some of the previous speakers. Relevance is anything that's going to make that value chain across the board from a customer coming to see an advisor all the way through to retention or a claim easier. And anything that's going to make that easier, and whoever's going to improve any element of that value chain is going to be key to relevance in the market.
Well, we have heard a bit today about that, the value chain, which is nice. So we might come back to a couple of elements there. So I might ask yourself and Aurora for some perspectives here. And this I think is consistent with some comments today. But from Insurtech Connect Vegas last year, there was a quote from the panel, CEO panel: a good partner shared vision plus partner shared objectives plus transparency is what makes a difference in delivering well for customers. So I'd love to get both of your, Aurora and Hicham, your perspectives on that.
I think I'll start my answer by just, when you introduced me, as most amazing intros and moderators do, thank you, Mark. I just want to, I think it's important to say, I've been Insurtech founder for 6 years, and I know you were so lovely in mentioning all the success that I've had, but I've really, like a lot of founders, to be quite honest, I've had the shit kicked out of me at times, and it's been a really hard journey, and it hasn't really been successful. And one of the reasons I was so excited to come on the panel is because in the last 6 years, I've had a ton of, client engagements, whether that's, buy straight away and implement, or, you have a proof of concept. And particularly in the early days, I made a lot of mistakes as a founder, going off and selling to all kinds of insurance organizations. Like a lot of mistakes, and luckily over the years I've learned. But I think that what I have seen time and time again, what works, and I'm hoping Hicham agrees, is when from the Insurtech side, and something that's been mentioned in other panels today, is coming back to just really being clear on what your customer, and that customer might not just be the whole organization as a whole. It might just be this particular business unit that you're selling into and partnering with. Just being really honest and really clear about what does success mean to them, and what do you need to do to get there. And I'm telling you, it's different in every. I have not had a single cut and paste engagement in the last 6 years. And that's kind of crazy to believe, particularly in Australia, where a lot of my clients are very, from the outside, similar life insurance organizations, excuse me. So yeah, just being really clear from the beginning, and as you go, on what does success mean to that insurance organization, to that customer. It might change over time.
Oh, it's good. It's great to hear you say that. I've been on both sides of the fence, so I've worked on both sides of the fence, and I know how difficult it is to be on the other side. And one of the key things that we see is there's a lot of effort that goes into the initial sale, especially when you're talking to product providers. There's a lot of effort that goes into the initial sale, and then once the initial sale is done, implementation gets complete, and then it becomes just a BAU process. I think a true partnership is about understanding the end-to-end value chain of that organisation, what that organisation is doing. And not only that, you have the pleasure of seeing what others are doing in the industry from a different lens to what the insurers would be looking at. So bringing some of those findings, and obviously without sharing too much, but bringing some of those findings and seeing how there's relevance into the partnered organisation is where the biggest value comes in, and that's where the spirit of a true partnership comes in, and not trying to go past the boundaries of where your expertise are as well, but just where those expertise lie, making sure that you maximise that partnership and maximise those opportunities. And with that comes sales. Sale is a byproduct of that relationship.
There's some good comments earlier, I think, around championing too, finding the right people to help figure that value chain, the right contacts internally as well. Might move a little to you, Ben, around the customer need, and relevance obviously has got to come down to that customer need. So what do you see as the top things that customers need from insurers? Where should the focus be?
Obviously, pay your claims. Sort of goes without saying. But from a technology point of view, and again, a reflection of where the industry's been and the demand that we see from ourselves as advisors and for our customers, number one would probably be data flow of information. So getting information from the insurer to the advisor to the client is of paramount importance. Unfortunately, in today's world, a lot of the time that still means we as advisors need to sit on the phone for 45 minutes on hold, waiting to talk to somebody who might give us the wrong answer, because that information isn't necessarily available online somewhere. And I can't imagine what it's like for a client without an advisor. So that data flow is really, really important. And if we can get that right, you're going to have massive client retention, you're going to have really happy clients, you're going to have really happy advisors, and just as a reflection of that increase in productivity, you'll end up driving huge amounts of new business flows as well. Because I can tell you as an advisor, I want to do business with an insurer that makes it easier, not just in the front end process, but as on an ongoing process. So that'll be one major thing. Another one would be, I guess, ease of transaction. So you've all got a phone, we've all taken photos of the QR, we can all go into our super on our phone and we can change our investments, we can all change our Netflix subscription, we can change our health insurance subscription, but we can't do anything to do with our life insurance, which is kind of upsetting, and I would love to see something improved on that side. Those would be the two major things, and then thirdly, just engagement. Who here has a mortgage? Just who here has a mortgage, right? I'm going to assume you're in Sydney, so it's $5 million. So when I talk about engagement, I mean the average 50-year-old in Australia is very, very aware of what life insurance is and has it, right? But what we need to do is, I think, as a collective, is communicate to that younger age. I think Peachy did a pitch earlier towards the what are they called? Gen Z? I don't know, whatever. Kids these days. But,
Kids.
Yeah. People with hair. So if we can move that engagement to the younger age, I think that's really, really important, because, like I said, if you're 30 years old, you're probably going to have young kids and a massive mortgage, and it's a market that's not being met or serviced at the moment. So if we can combine the government push to have that market serviced, you combine the lack of tech and that massive amount of demand, I think those will be the three things that would sort of drive productivity in that area.
All right, so that puts the pressure on Hicham. So
Yeah,
if you're
100%.
going to be delivering on that need, what have you seen around how you actually get that experience through? You've dealt with a lot of teams with programs. Hicham, what do you do? How do you get that happening?
So I think Aurora touched on it before. I think every organisation and every touch point is very different, and with that, some organisations want to maintain their own identity around their touch points with the end customers, and that becomes a little bit difficult if you're a product provider versus whether you're a services provider, and how you tackle that. Essentially, as part of that, and one of the challenges that we've got in a life insurance space is when you're talking about who the customer is as well. There's the advisor, but then there's the end customer, and there's different approaches and different ways that you would tackle each problem. Some advisors want you to contact their customers direct, some advisors don't. It's having, I think what it comes down to is just really understanding the industry, understanding the needs within the industry, and then trying to come up with solutions that are aligned to each organisation's identity and what each organisation wants.
What's holding back on that?
I think a lot of it is the industry just hasn't caught up yet, and the industry needs to catch up. And what's held the industry back has been a few distractions that have been around up until this point. Trying to just a few small ones without mentioning. But we are playing catch up. The industry is playing catch up, and I think you're going to see the next couple of years those that don't catch up are going to be left behind, or not even a couple of years. I don't think we've even got a couple of years. I think very quickly the industry needs to catch up because the customer expectation is there. They can get it everywhere else. They can't get it in life insurance. They need to be able to get it in life insurance.
On that then, now Aurora, you're beating yourself up about success, but I think sometimes success is just sticking at it, and you've been doing a wonderful job at that. How do you help with the respect to that execution? How can you help insurers? What have you seen? What's your experience to actually help get that cut through, get that message through, get that insight, get that bravery? Are there some observations that you'd have in that space?
Oh, I think it's just about being a team player. I think that's my words of the year for 2024. To give you an example, so since December, at Zemble we've had a few new clients come on, and they're I'm currently working on implementations in Australia, South Africa, Chile, and Mexico. And what's so amazing to me is in each of those scenarios, that includes 2 really big insurers and 2 much sort of smaller mid-market players. And in each of those situations, Zemble's just one of like an army of not just vendors, but internal stakeholders that are working together to get, push the needle or get that sort of first milestone. And what's been really interesting for me is seeing how in different markets, how that plays out, and what I was referring to before around what's important. You can have I've got, of those 4 customers, 2 of them are very, very similar life insurance organizations with very, very similar products, but because the end customer is very different in different markets, that means they've got very different kind of ecosystem of vendors working together. And so I think from my perspective, being a team player, as an Insurtech, being a team player means so many different things. It means it means as a business person being ready to kind of network and make the right relationships and put in enough time. From a product perspective, that means really, really focusing on accessibility and the ability to connect with other products and systems. That really can't be understated, I think. It used to be 5 years ago, if you're in Insurtech, it was if you just show up and have this amazing proof of concept that's totally standalone, and that's enough to wow the customer to maybe give you a couple of extra years. But now I think businesses are thankfully looking much longer term, and so I think being a team player is. Yeah.
And most of the time, there's a heavy reliance on the insurance provider to broker some of those conversations and play the middleman in those conversations, and sometimes we don't have the expertise internally ourselves to even broker those conversations, and it comes across a lot better if it's orchestrated between the 2 partners and then brought to provide value to the insurer. Having to broker some of those conversations is a frustration from the insurer's perspective.
So then switching that to Ben, with all of the talk about the tech, understanding the value chain, getting some mindset shift perhaps, how do you help? What can insurers do more with that engagement, like Hisham's talking about? What more is there to do then to ensure that relevance?
Just continuous engagement with the client. and that as an advisor and also as an end customer. Unfortunately, in our industry, there's a couple of insurers that have spent tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars on tech development, and one of them launched maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it fell so flat that the BDMs that were selling that product, their KPIs changed from new business sales through to just retention. So again, continual engagement, asking questions. Is this what you want? Is this something that will solve for you for the problem that you have?
Yeah, I think we had a conversation recently. I think we've got Brett right here, LifeBid. Use that, I think, as an example of that conversation, the understanding, the stakeholder management, the combination of pieces there.
So there's a piece of software called LifeBid, which was built by an advisor, and I think that might be a big difference, right? Because life insurance is quite a complex, engagement with the client with statements of advice and all the rest of it. And what's sort of blown me away looking at the way that LifeBid's come to fruition through Brett is the same sort of conversation that we've had pretty much on every panel, right? It's about value it's about bringing value across every stakeholder in the value chain. So for LifeBid, it's the first piece of software I've seen that takes into consideration what the client wants, what the advisor wants, what the licensee wants, what the insurer wants, what the reinsurer wants, and it even involves government. So it's really exciting. And what's cool about that is the proof in the pudding there is that it's been funded by advisors across the country. So.
$50 later for that, Brett. So Hicham, a little more on that. Let's talk about getting the decision makers moving, the mindset. We've had conversations on this before as well. Any more thoughts around that shift? We've talked a bit about value chain.
Yeah. So personal opinion is the traditional way of sales needs to go out of the window, and I think there needs to be a shift in the mindset of how sales are done. I know how difficult it is sometimes to reach out to individuals within an organisation. I know I receive about 100 emails a day of people trying to reach out for various types of things, and most of the time you don't understand what value does each email or each approach is trying to take. So most of the time they get filed away pretty quickly. You start off saying, I'm going to respond to every single one just out of respect because someone took the time to put the email together, but then you get inundated with it. I think it's about, going back, I hate to use the term again, value chains, just understanding the real value that you bring into an organisation. Someone else on the previous panel spoke about finding somebody who can champion within the organisation that can champion what you bring into the table. And most of the time, that starts off from a business unit, so a particular business unit within the organisation. You need to bring tech into the conversation as well. I think bringing in both a combination of where the value is going to hit the most, someone's KPI within an organisation, and or a value to an advisor, which is going to drive sales and sales efficiency. But also bringing all the right people into the conversation to try to identify how do you make it work rather than will it work, or and that way you're getting the people that are champion at helping you navigate the organisation. Each organisation has its own level of complexity to navigate through. Understanding that is probably the most difficult thing. But if you get in front of the right people and you can prove the value chain, then you're going to deliver the benefit.
Thanks, Hicham. Now, just the sort of forewarning, any questions we'll take as well from the floor shortly. So any of those burning questions before we go to a drink. But I might just ask another one, because there is so much opportunity we're talking about across the value chain. And remember, we're talking a bit about advised life insurance, but there's opportunities in direct. There's massive opportunities in embedded insurance. There's opportunities in group. We have been focused a bit more in retail. There's lots of challenges across the value chain in pre-assessments, underwriting, medicals, getting reports, massive in-force books of business that we don't have enough people to service. So any thoughts, and more Hicham, Aurora, around thoughts, and Ben as well, in respect of, I don't want to exclude you, but how to better collaborate in some of this sort of product development or change or other transformation. Any more kind of thoughts before we go to the floor around what we can do to try and tip over a little bit more of that innovation in that development space?
Without being too specific,
Yeah.
anything that's going to reduce the touch point, and whether that's a touch point of an internal operational staff member, an advisor, or a customer, anything that can reduce an internal touch point that can make it more efficient, because the less time Ben spends trying to do an administrative task, the more time Ben can spend trying to get somebody who isn't insured. And we heard about the demand is there.
Yeah.
And he's just worried about how many emails I send him.
The advisor just can't keep up with the amount of demand. So the less time that they need to spend on something, the more time that they can be servicing the industry.
Excellent. We've got the QR code, so any questions that you've got, just as we close out. Are there any final thoughts? I mean, I might just wrap up a little in respect of what we're talking about here, because certainly between Ben and I, we're keen to nudge insurers to open up to more opportunities, right? We've heard through the day many opportunities to leverage technology. We've heard a lot here around just getting the value chain, appreciating that in ways to get the cut through. But we particularly want insurtechs to help that conversation, get to the bottom of what's going to make the difference, what matters, getting to the value story. And there is so much that we've seen actually going on in the general insurance space. We'd love to see more drive in the life insurance space. So we're keen on that. Any final comments around that before we go to the floor?
I reckon there's been a dearth of investment, and so when I see somebody like Kathy stepping up and talking about the claims management and reducing claims reducing the amount of time clients are spending on claim, I think that's just a simple example of something that can add a huge amount of value to an insurer. There's opportunity everywhere, right? Complete lack of investment. Just have a look around and see if there's somewhere you can add value back to the insurer or the client. Just give it to Brett, because I own him, so it's fine. Yeah.
Anything more?
Yeah, I was talking to the guys the other day on one of our prep calls, saying that I think that there's a lot. I think there's a mindset shift that, from the Insurtech founder perspective, or Insurtech selling in, I think that I'd love to see what we know as like POCs get a bit more elastic and a bit more common. That's a really hard thing to ask of an insurance organisation, because it's like they're not. If you're a business unit inside of an insurance org, it's almost like you have to go out like a founder and pitch for funding. Like it's that plus a bit of like House of Cards. Like it's full on, and then you kind of work on these crazy timelines just to kind of prove this one milestone. So I'd love to see. There's a lot. As Hicham said, there's a lot that an insurance org has to do, but I think if Insurtech founders collectively and individually could maybe think a little bit more about how we can bring a bit more ease and accessibility to proving value within like a POC type forum, I think that could sort of help on our end.
I think we might go to the floor. Lawrence is looking nervous, so we do want to make sure that Nigel earns his drink, so happy for him to run the floor with any questions that we've got with the microphone.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. We actually have got a couple come in from the QR code. The first one is, how could we use tech to onboard customers through one channel and grow into another without losing their loyalty benefits? There you go.
Well, it's an interesting one from Ben's perspective, whether that concerns you from a client.
Say it one more time for me, sorry.
How can we use tech to onboard customers through one channel and then grow into another without losing their loyalty benefits?
I'm not sure what the loyalty benefits specifically were, but
just the first bit.
Yeah, if you put aside the loyalty benefit, I wouldn't worry about that at all. So I don't see clients wanting to go from one insurer to another to another to another. It doesn't exist in our industry. It just I can't be more simple than that. If people think that, from my experience, 13 years at the coalface, it's a misnomer.
And a quick follow-up, assuming it's risk ins, including trauma, TPPD and income protection, not just life, why isn't there a push to amalgamate health insurance in the service proposition? It's a massive opportunity for embedded.
Or besides the law, there's a Health Insurance Act that disallows it, and I think there have.
That was good.
Yeah.
There's absolutely been some efforts in the past, but you do need a separate licence for that, and it can be quite tricky to bring together.
That was a much easier question.
All right, I think that might be it. Thank you.